Shantae in the Pirate's Curse has always held a special place in my heart. But let's stop for a second and ask ourselves, what is the most defining trait of Shantae? You may say transformations, but I'm thinking more of the hair whip. So what if we just took that away? In other words, is it possible to beat this game without whipping your hair? Well, let's find out. I'm going to play through the entire game from start to finish without ever pushing the Y button, except for using the boots weapon. Also, I'm going to be playing on Pirates mode where all the weapons are available from the start, or else the first boss is already going to be impossible. I have no idea if I'll be successful or not, but I'm really excited for this challenge since hair whipping is a core mechanic of this game, and taking that away from me will force me to play fundamentally different. Alright, enough talk, let's do this! The first level is really what you'd expect. Just use the boost to skip through the entire city, nothing really to talk about. Until you get to this. Now before I started the run, I expected to be able to just shoot the red cannonball back at him instead of using the hair, but apparently you can't. So I went through all the weapons to see if I could do anything until I discovered this. For those who aren't familiar, there's a special technique called the risky shuffle involving the boots. Normally the game forces the player to run a distance before starting the boost. However, if you hold the control stick in one direction and repeatedly tap the D-pad in the other direction, you can actually trick the game into thinking you ran that distance one way, and this lets you use the boots no matter how narrow your space is. Using this method, I found out that if you do a risky shuffle into a cannonball, this can actually hit the ball back like normal. So look at that, the boss is now possible again. Keep in mind that this was pretty hard to time right. This fight took me over 5 minutes, but eventually I was able to take him down. By the way, a bit of foreshadowing here, this definitely isn't the last time I'll have to do this technique in this run. Okay, let's just say, coming straight from the boss earlier, this fight that happens afterwards is an absolute joke. Once that's over with, I progressed through more of the city and also collect some heart squids and cacklebats along the way, why not? Now, as I was crossing the sewers, I ran into the first instance of a chest. I'll admit, at first I thought they were going to be impossible to open since none of my weapons worked. However, after a bit of experimenting, I discovered that if you do a risky shuffle right in front of a chest, it actually opens it. Well, what do you know? Now I can open this chest and all future chests along the way. Another obstacle conquered. Alright, now it's time to enter the first island. Once I enter Saliva Island, the enemies start to ramp up in difficulty a little bit, but still pose no significant threat compared to my arsenal of weapons. Regardless, I get the ring from the old guy and turn on the statues, and to my relief, they still activate from the cannon jump. However, the statues aren't the problem in this world. What is, you ask? This. This ham produces a ham stink when you, guess what? Whip it with your hair. And yes, this stink is required for you to progress through the island, except there's no way for me to get it. I tried every single trick I knew at the time, but unfortunately nothing worked. Having run out of options, I grinded for 10 minutes to buy the power kick, which basically serves as the alternative way for you to hit something. Now you won't believe what happened. The kick turns the ham, but doesn't produce the ham stink. That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in this game, just why? So does that mean it's over? I mean, if there's no way to get the stink, then I can't move on to the next island, right? Unless I don't use it. I know I just said I need the stink to continue to the island, but that's technically not true. You see, there's this speedrunning tactic called the food flow glitch. Basically what you do is you do a risky shuffle towards a boundary, and right before you enter into the other room, you eat something. This causes Shantae to float in the air and glitch through game assets until you enter another room. In this state, if you jump and attack at the same time, you can gain some horizontal distance, and if you use the hat, Shantae starts to fall normally again, while still being able to pass through the floor. With this method, speedrunners can actually clip through a good chunk of this game in fact, including these rocks to enter the dungeon below. So if I do it too, this means I can avoid whipping the ham for the ham stink. The only issue is I'm not a speedrunner myself in any capacity, so this is my first time ever trying something like this. And let me tell you, this is not easy to perform. Because of this, it took me quite a few tries, but I eventually managed to clip through the ground. Phew, and just like that, the run is saved. The dungeon itself has nothing worth mentioning, especially since I could, skip half of it with the weapons. And the bosses, whatever. So, moving on. Honestly, the entire overworld of Spiderweb Island is pretty uneventful, especially since the main gimmick of it doesn't even let you use hair whips in the first place. As for the dungeon, these switches turn off from the cannon jump, which is great, except it turns out I didn't even need them. At this point, the only real reason to ever explore these rooms is to find heart squids and cacklebats. The only real issue I have with this dungeon is that these things take forever to kill. I think it takes like 3 minutes just to take out one of them, and let's just say, this room is not fun. But other than that, I'm chilling. Oh, and the boss was easy too. Oh boy, Tan Line Island, the moment you were all waiting for. I'm just gonna address the elephant in the room here. How do I get past the temple? This is an unskippable segment in this island that forces you to play without any of your weapons. This means that yes, there are chests that I have to open but cannot, but forget those, I can't even get past the first room. And no, I don't have my power kick either. Since it's literally impossible to beat this part, entering it is basically out of the question. Because of this, I can't progress through this wall. But I can try the technique I did earlier on Spiderweb Island. Except already at first glance, this one's already gonna be much harder to pull off than that one. Not only do I have to go a farther distance, not only is my window of entry smaller, but when I come out of the ground afterwards, I have to somehow break a block from the bottom, which is typically not possible. Luckily, all of this is doable. I just have to get enough air, but not too much to the point where I glitch out of the screen, aim my descent carefully, and hopefully break the block by glitching it with the pistol. Here are a few of my many attempts. After over an hour, I finally managed to successfully clip myself over the wall and skip the temple entirely. And that right there was definitely the biggest challenge up to this point. With that monstrosity out of the way, the rest of the island is kind of a breeze. I also somehow end up with an extra key. I don't know. Pirate mode in a nutshell. The boss is a little tricky, however, because apparently you can't just scimitar him for free. And for a second phase, I had to use a super pike ball. Like, I had no choice. I wasn't gonna get anything done at the rate I was hitting him before. Alright, it's gonna be a little awkward coming back to a giant wall in the middle of the area that I was supposed to get rid of, but it's okay. I can just travel through the block I glitched into earlier, and everything should be fine. Oh, would you look at that? My Wii U crashed. Well, that certainly sounds very comforting. Okay, apparently the game doesn't let me access that area anymore without crashing, which honestly I can understand considering I completely broke that part to get here. Luckily, I can use the Pirate Flare item, which teleports me back to the ship. Thank God I had one though, or else I would have had to grind for a very long time until I got one. Before I move on though, let me just upgrade the pistol real quick. I see after all these years, Bog Island still hasn't changed. Despite me traversing through the absolute hell that is this overworld and the literal hell that we go into afterwards, there isn't much specifically to say about this part besides the fact that I gave up trying to fight these guys after about the 3rd or 4th one. There's just no point. Oh yeah, I also happened to learn that I can actually power kick these chests open the whole time. How convenient. Next up, I can actually skip half the dungeon by risky shuffling, but I just spent a few minutes sniping hard squids and that's it. Now the boss. Hey, remember when I said the first boss was hard? Yeah, can I have him back? Because this fight is torture. What you normally do against him is whip him in the face, which causes him to become vulnerable. I thought instead of the hair I could shoot the pistol at him instead, but guess what? It didn't work. So basically you have the hardest boss in the game with his vulnerability phase gone. Oh yeah, for those who didn't know, he's the hardest boss in the game, would you look at that? What you have to do is first hit these blocks while running on the boots. By the way, these are not risky shuffleable because for some unholy reason, the boss can actually hit you at the wall. So anyway, you then get onto the pillars that fall and then try to get as many hits as you can with the super pike ball. Oh, and try not to get hit while being 3 inches away from him. Did I mention he constantly breathes fire at you with an unusually high accuracy? Because of all of this, it is extremely hard not to take damage while fighting him, which is problematic for me since I only came prepared with 1 lobster tail. Yeah, I know that's my own fault, but I didn't know he was going to be this challenging. So let's just say I burned through quite a lot of tries on him. A lot of tries. A lot of tries. Not as much as the Tan Line Island skip, but still a numerous amount. In fact, it got so bad that I decided to grind some more food, and only then was I finally victorious. To be honest, the worst part of all this was that most of the pain I had to endure was self-inflicted. Anyway, before I head to the last dungeon, I'll just max out the pistol real quick. Okay, I'm just gonna say it, there's nothing to see here. The overworld, the sky, and the dungeon are all uneventful. Even the boss is tedious at worst. See, this is why I always insist Frostbite Island should have come before Mudbog. And with all of the islands cleared, it's finally time to unlock the final boss. For those who don't know, the boss is guarded behind an absolutely grueling tower level. However, I don't mean to brag, but for those who are familiar with my channel, you should know that I am an expert at this. So, I get past this part with no trouble at all. Alternatively, I could have actually just skipped the whole thing entirely, but come on, where's the fun in that? And just like that, the time has come to face the Pirate Master. Now here's where it gets a little awkward. Or maybe very awkward. The boss has 3 phases, the first of which I'm doing right now. It's tedious, but definitely doable. But here's the issue with this victory. If you remember, I mentioned Cacklebats a few times in the video. There are 20 Cacklebats scattered within the game and the player actually has to collect all of them. Up to this point, I've collected 18. One I just couldn't get because of the whole thing with the game crashing and all, but the reason why I missed the other one is because it just so happens that there is a Cacklebat right in the middle of Tan Line Temple, the thing I had to skip to even pass that level. Due to this, I physically cannot collect all 20 Cacklebats in a run like this. You know what that means? I can't access the other 2 phases of the final boss. What I get instead is what the game calls the bad ending, where you don't defeat the Pirate Master, he runs away, and the curse stays, hence the name Pirate's Curse. And at this point, I'm not even going to try to find a way to somehow skip the sequence like the other times. I don't think it's possible and I'd honestly rather not. So there you have it. Is it possible to beat Shantae in the Pirate's Curse without whipping your hair? Well, depends on the viewer's definition of beating the game. If you mean achieve any ending, then yes, it is possible. Hooray. You just have to do a few out of bounds shenanigans. However, if you strictly mean reach the true ending, then no. Due to Tan Line Temple's aggressive restrictions, you must whip your hair a couple of times in order to clear this stage and collect this Cacklebat. And frankly, I'm okay with that. However, I'm not quite done yet. Out of curiosity, I wondered, if I were to have all the Cacklebats, is the rest of the final boss still possible without hair whipping? So, I went back to Tan Line Temple and yes, used the hair whip to actually play the stage for real and collect the Cacklebat. Except I couldn't because I don't know, it must have been something with the whole glitching through the wall thing, but surprisingly, this level is bugged. This section is supposed to have a shadow mechanic, but it simply did not work. So, change of plans. I went into another file and retried the final boss. Now the thing about the second phase onward is that the Pirate Master actually takes away all of my weapons. Thankfully, my Super Pike Ball along with the Power Kick are still there, so with those two, I do manage to defeat his second phase. Alright, time for the third phase. I wonder if this is still possible. Yeah, I think we're done here. Well, I'd say this was a surprisingly productive event. I went through the entire game with access to my main tool blocked off. There were times when the gameplay was roughly no different from normal, and other times where I was flipping off the game's entire mechanics. And in the end, it all paid off with an acceptable result. Overall, this was more fun than I'd initially expected. The only things on my mind before I started was how boring and dragged out the boss fights would be. And while that's not completely wrong, there were other very interesting roadblocks I never would have expected. And honestly, just playing through the game one more time is never a bad thing. I still love this game, it's one of my favorite Metroidvanias. I don't have plans for any half-shiny hero content considering I find it inferior to this one, but with Shantae 5 on the horizon, who knows, I might do this challenge again, only time will tell. But, in the meantime, I appreciate you watching.